Hello friends, and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you in real time how I drew and painted this bee eater sketch using watercolor. For me, it was an exercise in trying to paint more loosely and expressively, and I will show you how I did that in this video. So let's get started. The reference photo I'm using for this project is from Pixabay, and I will add the link in the video description for that photo. The paper I'm using is Saunders Waterford cold press paper, and I'm using a 4H pencil to lightly draw out the shape of the bird. I'm just using really light pencil strokes in case I need to make any adjustments, and I won't have to erase too hard on my paper and risk damaging the texture. I also have this other real-time bird tutorial video. Just click here in the top right corner and it'll queue up to play next. This is one of my more popular videos of a goldfinch. If you did not want to watch this real-time drawing process, you can go ahead and skip ahead to the painting part. I taped the paper onto my watercolor board, and to get started I'm going to paint the entire bird from head to tail wet and wet, except for the darkest parts around the beak and the black stripe under the eye. And I'm just using my small brush. This is a silver black velvet size 2, I believe. One of my smaller round brushes. And I'm just carefully wetting the entire body of the bird. I'm going to go mostly wet and wet on this one. As the water starts to dry, the colors will stay a little bit more where I want them. So what happens is the first washes tend to spread out and blend more freely. Then as the paper dries, I can add slightly more detail, but it will still be primarily wet on damp. And I didn't do any painting of wet on dry on this one. Pretty much just painted all in one wet layer. Again, that's not required. I just wanted to challenge myself to paint more loosely and expressively, and that was the way I decided to approach it. So this first color here, this light blue, is cobalt teal. It's a semi-opaque granulating color. The greens I'm using are sap green and green gold, but primarily sap green in a fairly heavy concentration here. And the other color is actually New Gamboge yellow, but turns a very light green as it mixes in with that the other green colors. So you can see how the paper is quite damp and this color just really blends out very softly. I do need to work fairly quickly to make sure the paper doesn't dry, because I don't want any hard edges, especially at this stage. And adding a little bit more concentrated cobalt teal mixed with a little bit of that green gold that was still on my brush. Now I'm using a darker indigo here for the tail feathers. I'm re-wetting some of that blank space again, and softening the edges on that with the blue tail feathers. Back to the green. For his throat, I'm using some quinacridone sienna, which is very similar to burnt sienna, but it's transparent. It's not granulating like burnt sienna, so it's one of my new favorite colors to play with. And you can see the paper has started to dry a bit, so the paint is staying fairly in in the same area that I put it. It's not really spreading out quickly, but the paper is still damp, so I don't have any super hard edges at this point. Adding a little bit down here by the tail feathers. So as you can see, it's all getting more dry everywhere, and the paint is starting to stay where I put it. So this is the stage where I can add a little bit more depth and dimension with some detail, but still keeping it very loose and watery. Here I'm picking up some Perylene Violet, which is a really nice brownish, reddish purple color. Works really well with these red tones. So I'm using that just for that darker part of the throat feathers. And I rinse and blot my brush, and I'm just using the tip to help blend that a little bit more softly into that first sienna color. And helping a little bit more of the blend of that sienna into the yellow color underneath the beak. So I want to add some green detail there, but it's still a bit damp. Here I'm using a stronger concentration of that blue color. It's a mix of phthalo and indigo. The paper is slightly less damp, so I'm trying to add a little bit more feather detailing and texture. Some very watery green on top for the head. I'm using that sienna color for the outside of the eye. And I should probably clarify that I did do this step on dry paper for obvious reasons, because I do want to keep the detail and the sharp edges, and I want the paint to stay right where I put it. I wet the paper for the beak, and I use a mix of indigo with neutral tint. And I painted this wet and wet because I do want it to softly blend upward towards that highlight. I'm using my damp brush to help lift some of that paint away from the highlight area and just to encourage the more smooth blend and transition. And same color here around the eye. Also on dry paper. Now the lower part of the beak, this is also being painted on dry paper. Since it's primarily one tone and I want it to be darker than the top part of the beak. I had to make sure the top part was fairly dry so that I would get that hard edge between the top and bottom beak. I'm doing a little lifting. I'm mixing the blue and the green together for a turquoise color, fairly concentrated. I want to start adding some more depth and detail on those feathers because this section is still amazingly still pretty damp, but it's drying enough where I can make some separation of the colors. A deeper glaze of indigo on the tail here. And the paper has mostly gotten dry, so I'm going to blend it out to make sure that I don't have hard edges. And to do that, I just use my damp brush and I gently swipe the paint towards the dry area of the paper, and then it blends into a subtle transition. Back to the eye, painting the pupil. I had to make sure that the sienna part was completely dry and made sure to leave a space for the highlight. I'm using my Pigma Micron waterproof pen just for a little bit more detailing and just making that separation of the eye from the feathers a little bit more prominent. I'm going to paint the branch wet and wet, and I'm using a little bit of my ochre color. And I want to give it some dimension, so I'm going to put some shadow colors on the bottom part. Give it some shadows and highlights. So here I have some sepia, which is a really dark granulating brown color. And just touching the bottom of that branch where it's wet, and letting it blend into that ochre color. And I also like to take just some plain water and drop it, and that adds some interesting natural texture as well. Now I'm darkening around the beak area, using that stronger concentration of the blue mixed with the neutral tint, just to really draw some emphasis towards the eye. And I'm using the same color for the feet, and I'm just painting this on the dry paper. And my Bee Eater watercolor sketch is complete. Thanks again for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up, as this helps my small channel to grow and reach more watercolor enthusiasts like you. Also consider subscribing to my channel for more art tips, techniques, and tutorials. And if you'd like a free watercolor techniques e-guide plus video demonstration, then please visit my website at createwithora.com/free. You can also click this link in the top right corner, and that will take you to that page as well. Until next time, happy painting.